This podcast may contain explicit language. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique rating style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
We also welcome our returning celebrity guest from my film discussion group, Cinna Madison. You know him from his previous appearances on Rounders and last week's episode on Easy Rider. It's Jesse Sertle.
Woo! On my quest for that gold jacket. I'm loving it.
Any less cheesy the second week in a row?
No. I'm loving that gold jacket. Getting closer.
Well, you have to earn your hat before you get to the gold jacket, and we pretty much determined that the tumbler glass set will be 15.
Ooh.
By a fan vote. I think that became the number one thing. So it's at least got to be number 20, and it may get voted down. But fleeces may be in order. We also welcome our other returning celebrity guest. You know him from his appearances on Saving Private Ryan, Red River, and Ghostbusters. It's my brother-in-law, Keith Techmeier.
Tom, do I have to talk now, or are you going to ask me questions? How does this work?
So your first time on the show, and you still don't know that I do this whole routine?
It's different every time. You call it a routine. It's different every time.
You were only on like 4 weeks ago, and I did the exact same thing.
Am I supposed to talk? I don't know. What the fuck's going on?
Okay, we are off and running. All right.
Yes.
Tonight for our
diarrhea.
Only fitting for a Quentin Tarantino film. Tonight for our 220th episode, we discuss my personal favorite film from 2019, celebrating its 5th anniversary this week. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, directed and written by Quentin Tarantino, starring Leonardo DiCaprio as Rick Dalton, Brad Pitt as Cliff Booth, Margot Robbie as Sharon Tate, Emile Hirsch as Jay Sebring, Margaret Qualley as Pussycat, Timothy Oliphant as James Stacy, Julia Butters as Trudy Frazier, Austin Butler as Tex, Dakota Fanning as Squeaky, Bruce Dern as George Spahn, Mike Moe as Bruce Lee, Luke Perry as Wayne Maunder, Damian Lewis as Steve McQueen, Al Pacino as Marvin Schwartz, Damon Harriman as Charlie Manson, Lena Dunham as Gypsy, Madison Beatty as Katie, Mikey Madison as Sadie, James Landry Hebert as Clem, Maya Hawke as Flower Child, Victoria Pedretti as Lulu, Sydney Sweeney as Snake, Harley Quinn Smith as Froggy, Scoot McNairy as Business Bob Gilbert, Kurt Russell as Randy Miller and the narrator, and finally, because it's a Quentin Tarantino film, Michael Madsen as Sheriff Hackett on Bounty Law. Recognition for this movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, was released on July 26th, 2019. It grossed $374 million worldwide and received praise from critics for Tarantino's direction and screenplay, the performances, particularly from DiCaprio and Pitt, cinematography, soundtrack, sound design, costume design, and production values. The National Board of Review and the American Film Institute named Once Upon a Time in Hollywood one of the top 10 films of 2019, and the film was nominated for 10 Academy Awards: Best Picture, Best Director for Tarantino, Best Actor for DiCaprio, Best Original Screenplay again for Tarantino, Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design, Best Sound Editing, and Best Sound Mixing, winning 2 for Best Supporting Actor for Brad Pitt and Best Production Design. A novelization written by Tarantino in his debut as an author was published on June 29, 2021, that includes extended looks at each of the major characters in the film. In December 2021, the film's screenplay was listed number 22 on the Writers Guild of America's top 101 greatest screenplays of the 21st century so far. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood currently holds at 86% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, an 84 score on Metacritic, and a 3.8 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So as we begin each week, Dad, what is your relationship to this film?
Saw it in the movie theater, and I don't know if I've seen it since until I watched it again for this episode.
So, you neglected to mention you saw it in the theater with me the second day it was out.
Correct.
And
I try to forget that.
I do very much remember seeing this film for the first time because the tension in the film builds and builds and builds. And by the end, when we get to this most ridiculous outburst of absolute violence that you're anticipating throughout a Quentin Tarantino film, we laughed our asses off, quite literally, in the theater.
Yes, everybody was laughing. We
were the only two there, so, I mean...
No, there were other people there, I'm sure. Pretty sure
there
were
were the only two there, then everybody was laughing.
But okay.
That was my point, but yeah, okay. Jesse, what's your relationship to the film?
The first time I saw it was in the middle of the night, because I knew I heard it was a good movie. It was during the actual pandemic, so it's about a year later. And it was the middle of the night, had nothing to do, and I'm like, I want to watch this movie. I heard it's really good. I watched it, absolutely loved it, loved everything about it. To this day, I still loved it. Like, I'm watching it again for this podcast. I was looking forward to it. Very excited. I own it. I like everything about this movie, so I'm jazzed to talk about it.
Well, I also didn't see this movie with Thomas, so my opinion isn't as valid. I knew that the movie was coming out.
Pick a fight with me, aren't you?
It's fun. I enjoy it. That's kind of why I'm here. So I knew that there was a new Tarantino movie coming out. I didn't really know what it was about, and then I started seeing the ads for it. Learned what the premise of the movie was, and I said, "Oh, that's a really fun take," because he likes his historic pieces that he writes. And I was like, I don't really know of anything like this that exists, and I really like things that he does. So, but I didn't go to the theater to see it, and I regret that. I watched it in this room. I've probably seen it 6 times. I think all in this room. And that's the entirety of my relationship with it. But it is one of my favorite movies, actually, not just my favorite Tarantino movie, but one of my favorite movies.
Oddly enough, we asked our office staff this week about their affection or lack thereof of this movie, and almost universally, they all dislike this film. Now, I mean, I knew it when my mother and I sat my sister down and tried to get them to watch this movie, saying it was probably the least full Tarantino piece that you'd ever had, because it's not as violent. They saved the violence for really the end portion of things. Up until then, it's just kind of a narrative story. But I think that's, for me, what works quite so well is you're anticipating all of these things. It gets built up in your mind to the end, and then gets that great release point by the end when it's just so absurdly violent that I love the film. But I'm kind of unusually torn. I would have thought this would have been a much more appealable film than like Pulp Fiction or Inglourious Bastards, and yet to the general public, I don't know if this has caught on in the way it has for the four of us.
I don't think it's a film that I hear a lot of people talk about.
No. I mean, when it came out, I thought for sure this would be talked about among his greatest films. But 5 years on, I don't know if that conversation's still happening. So what is this movie about?
I don't know if the movie's about anything. I think you're just watching an alternate version of history play out. But you got somebody who gets to decide what snippets of that history you see. So is it about Tom Dalton and his return to a screen in a serious role? I mean, I don't think that that's what that movie's about. It is about the Manson cult. That's not about that. So is it about Hollywood in the late 1960s? I mean, I don't think so. I don't think it's any of those things. So maybe it doesn't have to be about anything, in my opinion. But you might have an alternative view.
I think the thing that I really took away from this last viewing with it is kind of the confluence of things that go into how celebrity is created. I mean, by the end of the film, if you take that the ending of the film is actually in reality of what's going on in the movie, because there are a lot of people that have an interpretation that the entire last 30 minutes is all a acid trip from Cliff. Everything is happening in his mind. It's like a hallucination. If you don't take that and you take that this literally happened in the universe Tarantino is inventing, I think that a lot of the movie has to do with the weird ways in which celebrity can be created. Rick Dalton, early in the movie, kind of gives you the secret to what will eventually happen. I'm one pool party away from being in a Polanski film and rescuing my career. So by the end of it, his stuntman and his stuntman's dog save him from this pack of weird hippies who are about to murder him and his new wife. And yet he somehow relaunches his career by the neighbors coming down the driveway to figure out why there were all those cop cars and an ambulance.
I mean, the simple fact is that everything can change, and success or failure or your big break can happen completely by happenstance. They were there to kill Sharon Tate and the people in her house, and because Rick goes out and pounds on their car, they decide to go after him instead, and everything changed.
Yeah, I see it more as two stories of people in transition. I can see the Rick Dalton character, he's at the end of his career transitioning into a different type of acting career. And then the Margot Robbie, the Sharon Tate, and the Roman Polanski, they're kind of at the starting point of their careers. That's what I saw with them. And then just kind of how they kind of meshed together. They kind of had the same sort of trajectories, or just at different points.
No, I think that's a definite part of the film, but yet by the end of it, they're interacting and could be connecting in the next film. I mean, with the way Hollywood is somewhat obsessed with pairing older stars with younger actresses, he could very well be Sharon Tate's lover in the next Polanski movie in this universe.
I saw and he definitely I saw there was a couple scenes where he kept me they were basically reflections of earlier scenes. Like when Polanski and Sharon Tate get off the plane the first time, it's basically the same. It's reflected later on when Dalton and his wife get off the plane. That's almost the same scene verbatim.
Yeah.
Well, think about this. I mean, they talk about the last film she made, which was Dean Martin and Sharon Tate. And Dean Martin had to be in his mid-50s at that point in time. Mm-hmm. And Sharon Tate was, under 30. And that was, nothing big in Hollywood there. I mean, age difference doesn't matter. As long as it's the man who's much older than the woman, apparently.
Well, unless it's The Graduate.
Even then, she was only, 4 years older than
Hoffman, yeah.
Than Hoffman and Bancroft at the time. She was made to look older.
So with a lot of Tarantino's, Keith kind of mentioned it before, with his historical retellings, if you will. We have Inglourious Bastards, we have Django Unchained. I don't know, I haven't seen The Hateful Eight yet. It's been a glaring omission on my watch list for a while. But Tarantino's been kind of obsessed with this for the back half of his career, of trying to tell these kinds of stories where it's a reclamation from a marginalized, or I think somewhat of a cosmic justice perspective. So there are people like my little sister who really objected on our 4th episode to Inglourious Bastards, and still does, because she finds it offensive that all the historical inaccuracies, even though that's really not the point of the film. Whereas I think the four of us at least enjoy this film for its kind of fairy tale and cosmic justice aspect. So is this more offensive, or is this fair game? Did he do this in a tasteful way?
I mean, I agree with your sister on some of those things.
Shocking.
When they get this historical part wrong. But this movie I looked past because I thought this was a better shot movie. There's some that they're just horror movies and they get the history wrong, and that bothers me even more.
Yeah, I don't think he really gave a shit about any of that the entirety of the time he was making any of his movies. Going with Inglourious Bastards, I like to believe that is the actual history, and everything that I have over there on the shelf is just boring academic nonsense where people that don't want to have jobs for a living clack away at the keyboards and sent it off to the printer. Like, I wrote a book. Like,
Yeah.
huh?
He gets it. We double down on being unemployed here.
Yeah, and it also says this too, is to a large degree, the problems that were solved in these two different universes, in these two different periods in time, were solved with extreme violence, both of which kinds are illegal. You can't have machine guns and you can't have flamethrowers. And I think if these movies are trying to say anything, they should say that we should be allowed to have them.
Well, I think we should petition the NRA to take up our cause.
Mm-hmm. Especially the flamethrower part.
Yes.
I mean, that's the best way to get rid of the ice.
And the crazies in your swimming pool.
Yes, and the crazies in the swimming pool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it might be better. We don't know.
It's not truly American unless everybody has a flamethrower in their tool shed.
Yeah.
True. And as far as the historical portion, how many of you have seen the movie Helter Skelter?
Oh, a long time ago.
Heard the Beatles song.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's based on Vincent Bugliossi's book of his prosecution, the investigation, arrest, and prosecution of the Mansons, and the crimes leading up to it. And quite frankly, you think about that. I remember as a kid, I think my parents weren't again watching what I was, or paying attention to what I was watching. I think I watched that for the first time. I must have been about 8 or 9. Being absolutely freaked out about these people coming in and just, slaughtering people. But through the entire time, you're hoping that somehow or another, the history changes, that it really doesn't happen to these people like it really did. And I think that's part of the whole philosophy of Tarantino on some of these films is, let's have the ending we want instead of the ending we got.
I think that's kind of neat because he just says, "Why not?" Going back to that too, being a kid and having those thoughts that the Mansons are coming to get me. That was actually something that legitimately scared a lot of people, and people were legitimately terrified. So, kind of rewriting that ending. I think that was a fun thing. I wasn't expecting any of that. Yeah, there was the whole thing in Inglourious Basterds where they did the rewrite history, but I had completely forgotten about that. But on the same note, I'm sure you were relieved when you were a kid to find out that the Manson stuff happened in California, and there aren't any serial killers in Wisconsin, so you didn't have to worry about it.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
None at all. Yes.
None.
Not a one.
No,
not a one.
Single one.
I mean, to be fair, though, my father loved to scare the shit out of me with unsolved mysteries. And I was deathly afraid of the Unabomber.
Yeah, every time you'd hear Robert Stack, you'd freak out.
He has one of the creepiest voices.
Mine? What was mine? Mine was John Wayne Gacy.
That was Chicago.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, because we got the story, because he kidnapped somebody that went to one of the things in Galena where I came from. That's
he's a transplant.
Was known from there, so my parents knew him. So that was a little bit more in my backyard. And then I guess one of my family members actually lived down the street from him. So that was a little bit more real as compared to the Manson family, which was 20 years prior to me being born and on the other side of the country. And there's no serial killers, murders in Wisconsin, so we're safe.
Never has been, never will be. But also too the way that the story was changed when the kids went out and killed Sharon Tate. If you know a little bit about the history, they had no intention of killing her. They thought that somebody else had lived there. They were going after the former resident of the house who had already sold it, and these people had already bought it and moved in, and Sharon Tate was in there. They weren't the intended targets, but once they were inside, it was like, well, it's too late.
I found them to be more diabolical than I thought about them in real life. I thought in the real life it's more of being followers and caught up in that particular scheme of this. Where this feels like they're active participants, really willing to do this on their own. Like there's no sort of indication. It almost seemed like some of the scenes. It almost seems like Tex was the one that was instigating this because he kept telling him, "What do you think I'm a liar?" And then I'm like, well, in my back of my head, I'm like, maybe you are lying, even though it probably wasn't true. But like that's how it kind of set up in my mind. But I felt like they're more diabolical than I would think about them in real life. They didn't, especially in the Helter Skelter film, they came across as more as like zombies that were under the spell of or under the control of somebody.
All right, Dad. Well, are you ready to help us dive deeper into this film? Do you have our plot summary ready for us?
Yes. Welcome to 1969 Los Angeles, where everything is changing, and the golden age of Hollywood is giving way to something darker. Enter Rick Dalton, Leonardo DiCaprio, a former TV Western star struggling to find his place in a rapidly evolving industry. Alongside him is Cliff Booth, Brad Pitt, Rick's laid-back, enigmatic stunt double and best friend, who's equally adrift but with a mysterious past that suggests he can handle anything thrown his way. As Rick navigates a career in freefall, he's desperate to reclaim the limelight, landing guest star roles in TV series and contemplating a move to Italy to star in spaghetti westerns. Cliff, meanwhile, spends his days driving around the sun-drenched city, running errands for Rick and crossing paths with an eclectic mix of Hollywood's fringe characters. Just next door to Rick lives Sharon Tate, Margot Robbie, the radiant, rising star whose life is brimming with promise and possibility. Unbeknownst to Rick and Cliff, Sharon's fate is on a collision course with the notorious Manson family, a group of twisted outcasts led by the sinister Charles Manson. Damon Harriman. As the lives of Rick, Cliff, and Sharon intertwine in unexpected ways, they each face their own reckonings with the harsh realities of a changing world. Set against a meticulously crafted backdrop of bygone era, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a love letter to the City of Angels, an exploration of fame, friendship, and the insidious shadows lurking just beneath the glittering surface.
Thank you. Did you know? The producers had some initial difficulties convincing Hollywood Boulevard vendors to allow their premises to be fitted with period facades to better reflect the 1960s. However, after the production wrapped that section of the shoot, most of the same people asked if they could leave the facades in place, since they now much more preferred the period. Did you know? Very rare for a Quentin Tarantino film, some scenes contained improvisation, particularly when Rick Dalton forgets his lines when filming Lancer, and afterwards rants to himself privately in his trailer. Leonardo DiCaprio had a very difficult time playing the scene as Dalton, rather than as how he himself would, especially since Dalton is supposed to be an actor of limited range. DiCaprio suggested that Dalton forget his lines mid-scene, ironically, to help him stay in character as Dalton. The subsequent scene in the trailer was also unscripted and improvised. Did you know? Sharon Tate puts her feet up on a seat in the theater while watching The Wrecking Crew from 1968. If one looks closely, you can see that her feet are rather dirty. In real life, Tate hated wearing shoes and would take any possible opportunity to not wear any in public unless the situation absolutely called for it. Tate would even go as far as wearing rubber bands on her feet to give the illusion of wearing sandals while out eating at restaurants. Did you know? During the film, Cliff and Rick watch an episode of The FBI, in which an army truck is hijacked. A producer went to a local source for film vehicles searching for a similar truck to recreate the scene, and, to his surprise, he was taken to the actual truck used in the TV show. They cleaned it up, gave it a fresh coat of paint, and used it in this movie. Did you know? While scouting for locations, Quentin Tarantino visited Lee Van Cleef's home. While there, he noticed a giant poster of Van Cleef's face hanging in his garage. Tarantino thought this was both funny and strange and decided to give Rick Dalton the same thing on his driveway. Did you know? Burt Reynolds was originally cast as George Spahn, the ranch owner, but he died before he was scheduled to shoot his scenes. Bruce Dern replaced him in the role. Additionally, the role of James Stacy was originally written for Bill Paxton, who unfortunately passed away while the script was being written. Paxton's role would instead go to Timothy Olyphant. And with that, we will take our first break and we'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 221st episode, we welcome back our most frequent guest, Christine Duncan, and our two-time returning guest, V.P. Morris, the renowned horror author and podcaster, to discuss yet another seminal Alfred Hitchcock film for its 70th anniversary, Rear Window, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, written by John Michael Hayes, music by Franz Waxman, starring James Stewart, Grace Kelly, Thelma Ritter, and Raymond Burr. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Before we move much further, this would normally be our Ask Dana Anything section, and we do not have any outward listener questions from the greater internet realm. So do either of you have any interesting questions for my co-host?
All right. So he's mentioned he's only seen this movie once. What is your favorite Quentin Tarantino movie then?
I think it would be this one, although Inglourious Bastards would be close behind. I don't know. This film to me was the most light and the most digestible. I'm not somebody that's really into a lot of violence. And I personally think Reservoir Dogs is a better film than Pulp Fiction. It's still, the violence is troubling to me.
To be fair, he hasn't seen Django. He hasn't seen Hateful Eight. He's seen neither of the Kill Bills, although neither have I. He's not seen Death Proof.
No.
And it's probably been a long time since you have seen Pulp Fiction, because you weren't even on our original episode for that.
No, it's probably, I think I've seen it in the last 5 years, but it's not been more recent than that.
But if he's saying the violence, it's kind of kicked up to another notch in a lot of those. I mean, Pulp Fiction has some. It's not as bloody as some of them, but a lot of the ones you mentioned it's kicked up to another level of the violence in some of those.
Yeah, I know. But
like, Kill Bill is probably one of the most violent movies that I can think of.
Oh no one gets hurt at all in that movie.
Yeah, okay. Actually, I think Dad might enjoy Jackie Brown a little bit, but he just hasn't seen it. I only got to it last year sometime.
It's been it's 25 years for me or something. I don't know. It's been a long time.
It's different. I will say, if you're going to watch The Hateful Eight, there's the regular version, and then there's the 9-hour Quentin Tarantino director's cut one. That one is, in my opinion, quite a bit better than the theatrical release version. The regular version, I think it does a little bit better of a job of explaining what's going on, and has enough of the content that was cut. You could tell it was cut just because the movie was already so long. I don't have a problem sitting for very long movies, so that's maybe just my opinion, but if you can stomach it, watch the long one.
Well, there is the episodic version on Netflix, I think.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, so I don't know how that differs from the director's version.
So it's like 4-hour-long episodes, from what I understand.
Okay, well, that might be about the same then. Just chopped up. I would maybe check that out. I might check it out myself.
I guess it's a reason to get Netflix again for me, so we'll see.
There you go.
Maybe for
one
a week
of
or
the
so.
Rare things that I actually appreciate about Netflix. Anyway, if you have any Ask Dana Anything questions, anybody out in the ether or the internet or the general universe of the world, you can submit your questions via any of our socials at GMOAT Podcast. That's GMOAT Podcast. Or you can email us at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com, or find us on our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMOAT Podcast. And that's Ronnie with a Y, not an I-E. All right, let's move into the rest of the evening. Best performance is where we had left off. Dad, who do you have down?
I have Brad Pitt. I think his performance was just outstanding. Again, I mean, I'd probably say this too often, but the character could have been a lot more buffoonish than he made it. He undersold it and made it very believable. This guy who's just basically kind of, a holder on, more or less. Guy who's holding on to somebody else to have a life. And I don't know, I just thought there was a lot of nuances, a lot of humor built within his character, and I think he played it to perfection.
Well, he did win the Academy Award for a reason. I will say I have him down for my most charismatic instead of best performance, because I think that he is such a cool and charismatic customer in the entire film. He's the guy who never seems to get rattled, even when the hippies show up with knives while he's high and very, very stoned. He just never seems to get rattled, whether that's fighting Bruce Lee or killing his wife, maybe.
Yeah,
but my best performance is a much more, I thought, layered performance that doesn't get recognized as much in this movie because he's a harder character to like, given his neuroticisms and his general insecurity throughout the entire film. And I know I'm generally biased because he's one of my two favorite actors, but I went with Leonardo DiCaprio. I think Rick Dalton, to me, is one of the more fascinating things about the film.
You like yourself some Leo. Yeah.
I love Leo. Leo's in two of my three favorite films.
Titanic and what else?
No, not Titanic.
What's Eating
It's
Gilbert
like the
Grape?
one DiCaprio performance I can't stand.
No.
Gatsby?
The Departed.
Departed.
And Inception.
Inception.
I think he is one of the best performances of all time in The Departed, personally, but yeah.
Who directed Inception?
I'm sorry?
Who directed Inception?
Chris Nolan.
Okay, everything makes sense now. All right.
Yeah. Chris Nolan has directed two of my three favorite films, and DiCaprio is in two of my three favorite films.
Imagine that. Yeah, I say my best performance. I noticed last week that we can get non-actors in this spot.
Mm-hmm.
So I went with Quentin Tarantino as director and screenplay writer. I thought this was his best movie so far. Obviously, I'm waiting on the next one to see if it's better, but this one I felt like his direction was great. It gave me enthralled the whole time. There's nothing in these scenes that I don't detract from him. Some of the other movies, there are scenes I do detract from him. But this particular one, I felt like he did very good writing and directing. And he should have won.
Should have won what?
Was he up? I know you said it, but was he up for Best Director?
Yes. He would have
won.
had to have beaten out Bong Joon-ho, though.
And Bong Joon-ho did what?
Parasite.
Yeah, that's tough. That's a tough one.
It was a tough year. I mean, between Sam Mendes' 1917 and Parasite, and you had a lot of good films in 2019. I thought Marriage Story was exceptional that year. I thought Jojo Rabbit was really good.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a lot of people that could have very easily gotten in there, but I thought this being his best film and his dedication to only doing 10, so he only has theoretically one left if you combine the two Kill Bill films.
Has he won yet for Best Director?
No, he's won two original screenplay awards, one for Inglourious Bastards and one for Pulp Fiction.
So it's just a gimme then for his last film. He's going to get Best Director.
I think that's what everybody's projecting, but I don't know if that will be accurate. It'll depend on the quality of the film.
He already scrapped the one he's been working on and starting a new project completely fresh.
I give him that if that's what he's doing. It. I think it takes some courage to be in the middle of something that you've worked so hard on and not say, well, I just got to finish, and know that it's not your best and just to set it aside. And I know that we had talked about, like you'd mentioned, not non-actors being considered for this category too. I'm repeating what I did from the last time I was on, and I'm going with the second key grip. Brian, they didn't give a last name, but second to that, because he was amazing, is going to be Brad Pitt. So I liked it because, which is somewhat characteristic of the way that he acts anyway, but there's so much angst behind the story of this character that his life did not exactly plan out the way that he envisioned it. And I think the reason why he's casting on someone's coattails is because that's the only thing keeping his head above water. Because the whole situation with his wife, the fact that he goes to parties, and like the wives and girlfriends at the parties are like, don't talk to him. He killed his wife. And nobody knows who he is and nobody cares. So it's like somebody says something to him, and he's got the wheels spinning in his head while he's just angsty chewing on the bubble gum, and he's thinking about what's about to come out of his mouth. And then it's controlled chaos when he actually does. And I think that that's absolutely fantastic. And I think that he had to create that. It's really hard to have that pent up aggression that doesn't manifest, that sits in the background of whatever it is that you're putting forward. And I know a lot of people like that work that are professionals or something along those lines that can't say what just comes to their mind, and they have to hold back and censor themselves a little bit. And I saw, him that entire time, and it made that performance better than the others because it had an extra element to it that you really can't easily pull off.
It is absolutely no wonder that you are married to my sister. You similarly have this like affection for people who get absolutely no recognition whatsoever. My sister's just happened to be, I love the third quarterback on a particular football team because he never gets played, and so his parents have to be so sad.
That's something that they would say, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're slowly becoming the hippie tree hugger that she is.
Well, I was in Madison last weekend, so some of it probably rubbed off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Shots fired.
I don't know what happens when you go down there, but I just had this urge to just dye my hair and, shrink my pants down to 3 times the size that they should be and get a shoulder bag. I don't know what happened. I never wanted to buy a Subaru in my life, and then I got down there. Not only did I want one of those, I was out buying NPR stickers and thinking about getting a bike rack.
Did you have some skateboards in the back, too?
I had so many reasons to be ashamed of myself by the time I got home.
Oh, man.
Did you go home and purchase a hacky sack on top of it?
Oh, that's my favorite thing. Was it... who was it that was on Between Two Ferns? And Jeff Galifianakis turns to him and he says, when you and Woody Harrelson aren't in a movie together, are you upset that somewhere there's a sack not being hacky?
Man.
Best secondary performance, Keith.
The city of Madison, apparently.
Is it the third casting director on the film?
I'm going to say this, and I actually mean this. The next best performance is their imagination of the city of Los Angeles. What the thing that I know, I got the chance to spend some of my life with some people that as adults decided to move to Los Angeles in 68, 69, and 70, and for the rest of their life talked with so much fondness about what it was like there at that time. And Quentin Tarantino was there. And he says that was such a big thing, is he remembers being, I believe it's with his stepfather, and them cruising around and going up through the hills, regardless of where in the neighborhoods they were going, and some of the sights that he would see, and the picture that town wanted to paint of itself, and how that imprinted on his mind, and exists in the minds of others that lived there at the time. And it's a really difficult thing to try to recreate a specific snapshot in time that makes you believe that it's real. We could do that with Westerns where, there's not very many Westerns that actually look like the West. They just, they're all kind of campy and somewhat of a flavor of what they made on television in the 1950s. They film lots of World War II movies in Louisiana, and for some reason it just doesn't look like Japan. I don't know what it is, but it just doesn't quite look that way. But that felt, and I've never even been there, and it made me feel like I was in Los Angeles in 1969. So that's my next choice, actually.
Okay, Dad.
Secondary performance is Tarantino, both for writing and directing. It moves, the pacing is great, the script is tight and well done. There's not really any slow moments in the film that I thought of or saw again when I was watching it. So I think overall this film to me shows a man who has spent a couple of decades now perfecting his craft.
And I would agree. I think from the full budget that he received for this movie, and you can tell the production value has dramatically increased with each of his films. This is, I think, by far his most expensive film to date, and had to gross as much as it did in order to basically break even. I think they were expecting that it needed to make like $400 million worldwide to just basically break even. That being said, I do find that this is a very well-crafted movie from a production and a technical design. I think it's well-crafted for the aesthetic that he's trying to go for, which is the like super creepy historical nervousness that we probably all have, even though I was not particularly familiar with Helter Skelter or the Manson family in general. I just kind of knew something was supposed to happen. And then when it doesn't, I think it pays off. So his total execution on a package, the writing, the directing, his vision of what this is supposed to be, and clearly he had a lot more written out because he wrote the book basically on his notes for each of the characters. I think he most definitely deserves my secondary.
Keeps his thoughts on Madison and just his complete rundown of the town, man. I love Madison. I'm still reeling on it, so that's why I thought about it. But my best secondary performance, I agree with your best performance for Leo as my secondary performance, because I just thought he brought a lot more depth into that character. There's a lot more going on behind the eyes there. And when you're explaining the did you know portion of like his improvisation in that scene, I'm like, that's perfect. He's actually thinking deep about that character. But like, I just felt like that character had the most growth throughout the whole film. And it was just kind of interesting to see like his insecurities kind of played out on his face, on his body. You could definitely tell he had some really not weird, I would say. He had some really big things he wanted in his life, and he was not getting that. And you could tell the fact that when he finally starts getting things, he starts acting in that uppity way that he's in the next echelon. But I'm still reeling about Madison.
I do like Madison. It's a beautiful town to be in, with the exception of the rampant communism. It's a neat place to be.
Well, I'm assuming you came down for the art on the square this past weekend.
Yeah, actually, I was there for that.
Yeah.
My buddy lives there, and he said, "Hey, let's go downtown to the Veterans Museum because they've got these displays going on. I want to go check it out." So I went with him and then another friend of ours, and yeah.
I mean, that's not so bad, that museum. It's a little bit small. I think they don't have the biggest collection. I think they could get more space to put things out there, but I thought it was a pretty good museum.
Yeah, I got a neat story to tell you, but you should go check this place out. But I'll tell you as soon as we're done here. But there's a restaurant that you need to go check out very soon because it will soon be gone. He sold the place and he's getting out of the country, and it's a cool story. I'll tell you when we're finished.
Apparently, the dogs are also upset at Keith about his comments on Madison because Kip lived there for a little while. Anyway, I already gave my most charismatic. Dad, who did you have?
I had Leo, true movie star, and he comes across that way throughout the film. I will give a special either performance or charismatic. I remembered watching it when at the theater, and then I saw it again. Damian Lewis just absolutely nailed Steve McQueen. I mean, that was just perfect. and that took some talent. It was not necessarily, it wasn't an impression, but it was him being Steve McQueen. I thought it was a great effort.
No, I would agree. Like, I didn't even have to look it up and know that was Steve McQueen that was talking.
Yeah, he looks just like him in the way he was done up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
the way
that's
he presents himself, and I'm like, that's Steve McQueen at the Playboy Mansion. I guess since I've interrupted, I guess my most charismatic was Brad Pitt. I felt like he captured every scene he was in. I think he took over scenes. He outshined Leo in some of the scenes. But I felt like he definitely owned this film. Getting his Best Supporting Actor award, yes, I completely agree with it for him.
Most charismatic, I had Margot Robbie, because she was having such a good time, and she didn't. It felt like that's just because that's her personality. And at any point in time, if you could jump in and hang out with any of the people that were there, I would want to go hang out with her, because she's all smiles and she's having a lot of fun and she's happy. And that scene when she goes to the theater and convinces them to not only let her in for free, but stops and does a couple of photos and some signatures. At first, it was kind of a quirky, hey, you mind if I get in there? But then they were like, oh, hey, yeah, would you mind doing X, Y, and Z? And she's like, absolutely, I will. And I think she then she goes into the theater and just a smile on her face. And I'll end up talking too long, but yeah, I choose her.
No one wants any of the hippies.
Those will be mentioned.
Send them back to Madison where they belong.
Those will be mentioned, but not quite yet.
Okay.
Best scene, I have 5 down, and you guys can nominate any others that you'd like, but I have Dalton meets with Schwartz to open the film, and that also incorporates Dalton's film work, where he's doing the 14 Fists of McCluskey. Then I have Cliff fights Bruce Lee, which has always been a memorable scene. I have on the set of Lancer, so kind of the scenes that we mentioned before with Leo and his improvisation and such. And the, Dark Hamlet? Or Dirty Hamlet or whatever. I have Spawn Ranch. And then I finally have the ending, the Manson family versus Cliff and Rick. So out of these, what is the best scene?
So what are your thoughts on the Dalton meets with Schwartz scene?
My personal thoughts?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a really good table setting moment. You have obviously this great cameo from Al Pacino kind of coming out, and you're not sure what he's supposed to be. You're trying to convince him that he's supposed to be in Italian movies, and immediately my mind flashes onto, oh, this is the Clint Eastwood career path. He was in Westerns on TV, and then he's going to go be in Italian Westerns, and he's going to come back and do cop dramas. That kind of thing. Obviously, his career took off, well after that, but it reminds me a lot of that. And then you get kind of the intersplicing of the universe setting of exactly who this character is, what he's been in. We got the precursor with the bounty law stuff, but now we get to see his film career where he's in some different various things. And obviously the flamethrower setup is always fun. Die, you Nazi bastards!
I do like the interjections in the scenes, the little snippets of you showing his past life, especially with the narrator over top when he goes, oh, he got a DUI, that's why he doesn't drive anymore. I kind of like that. You're kind of getting that building blocks of the characters that you're going to be rolling with throughout the entire movie.
It's a very good scene to drop you into that world.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else on best scene?
I really liked the ranch. Just because it's really introducing all of these people now. And it goes from, him picking up this teenager that he's seen a few times now, and then he gets up to if I remember, she's trying to not get him, she just wants to get dropped off, but then he's like, oh, okay, I know this ranch, and now it's this unveiling and it's this discovery. You kind of get a history of what this place was, and then you can see that it's what it is now, and then how it unveils. It's all kind of fun. I was like watching that one when I rewatched this movie. I make sure I'm not playing on my phone for that part.
For me, I'm looking at this, and I looked at a bunch of the scenes, and I really liked, the Spawn Ranch, and I really liked the initial montage, and then I came to the realization that the one scene that's the payoff for this film, it's the best scene to me. It is my favorite scene of this film, and it is my most indelible moment. And it is the ending, the Manson family versus Cliff and Rick. It is the wildest scene. It is the most hilarious scene. It is the scene where you immediately are just, you've been waiting for this, and all of a sudden now you're watching them get their comeuppance. And it just hits it for me. It's a 10 out of 10. And so I have no choice but to pick that as the scene. It is the payoff. It is the climax. It is everything about this film.
If that scene doesn't pay off, this movie doesn't work. The entire film is leading to that one moment. You've gotten the precursor where Rick is in his pool practicing his lines, and he's doing it again while drinking. So we already have that. We have where we've seen Cliff beat up Bruce Lee, so we know he knows how to fight. We've also seen him kill people, or maybe kill people.
Whoa. Yeah.
Allegedly kill people.
There.
Yeah. So, okay.
Be careful of a man with a spear gun.
We've seen Leonardo DiCaprio use the flamethrower in the 14 Fists of McCluskey and then do all the training. And when Cliff goes into the tool shed, we do see the flamethrower sitting there, so we know it's available. I mean, there are so many little tidbits waiting to come back around towards the end that the entire film is leading to that point. I 1000% agree. It is my best scene, favorite scene, and most indelible moment. It's the number one thing I think about. And I'm like, okay, we're 5 minutes away from this scene. I am throwing my phone like in the other chair. It is going to be as far away from me as I can be because I am watching this scene.
I agree with that. But I'm going to go on about Spawn Ranch, that scene. And my first question is, are we doing the entire, just Spawn Ranch in general, or the interjections between the Lancer meetup as well?
I would say just the Spawn Ranch piece of it, but not necessarily the cut-ups, because I think once he gets to actually Spawn Ranch, I don't think there's any real interjections between when he's going up to the house to meet George and then when he drives away. I think that's one long continuous thing.
That and the ending, yes, is one long continuous, but there is an intercut where you have that little Lancer scene where they're kind of having what I call it the fake cowboy scene. Because I like this scene because if you keep that in there, I like this scene because you have Leonardo DiCaprio doing the fake cowboy scene, and at the same time you have a kind of modern cowboy scene with Brad Pitt. Starting from when he gets out of the car, it does the same thing when the cowboy gets off his horse. You don't start from the head, you start from the foot, basically the feet. So you see his boots, it goes all the way up his body, just like you would see if a cowboy got off the horse. And just like the tension that's building up through the whole scene, the interactions Brad Pitt's have with each other, and I saw the playoff of you have the fake cowboy scene happen, and you kind of have a real cowboy scene happen because he's in this, even though it's in a fake cowboy town, it's Spawn Ranch. I just like it, and then, the ending, there's tension building, something's gonna happen, and you're like, who's gonna finally cross the line where Brad Pitt's gonna lose it? And that line is crossed is like, oh, you did something that's gonna get me in trouble. You're done. I'm done being civil with these people, and then you can see the anger come out right there. But like I said, the big thing for me is the tension build up and just how it plays off with the other scene that's happening at the same time. With the fake cowboy scene, because you see both of them kind of winning at their scenes, but in different ways.
So is that your favorite scene then?
Yes, that would be my favorite scene.
Okay, so then either of you most indelible?
For me, it is the ending. I know that we've covered the ending a lot, but the ending is the movie. I mean, the ending could be its own TV episode and it would win awards.
For me,
Yeah.
it's when they meet Pussycat for the first time. And she's walking across the street, and then you get Mrs. Robinson playing. Gives me that flashback to the Graduate, because it's the same thing going on where you have the older person seeing the younger person. And the fact that she is absolutely stunning is always something I remember about this film. Is her. I mean, she outshines what's her name? Sydney Sweeney?
Well, Sydney Sweeney's not in it much, but Margaret Qualley's on it.
But they're in the same scenes together, and I'm like, didn't even realize it until I rewatched this time back around. I'm like, oh my god, it's Sydney Sweeney. But like every scene that she's in, she chews up because I think she's absolutely stunning, and I just love that scene. That's what I think about this movie is her.
And I mean, there are a lot of big name young actors that are in this well before they actually made it to do anything else.
Same
which
thing for
we will be talking. So with that looks like a good spot for our second break. We will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, as of this last month, all of our episodes are also now in video format. That's right, you can see my resting nerd face and all of Dana's famous okays in pristine high definition. So far, we have The Hangover, Batman 1989, Forrest Gump, and our revisit of 12 Angry Men, along with last week's Easy Rider. They are all now available to watch. Just head to youtube.com/@GMotePodcast. Or I have the full video and audio feeds on our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMotePodcast. And that's, again, Ronnie with a Y, not an I-E. Both of those are in the episode description of this episode, so check us out there. And if you do, please like the video or subscribe to us. We would really appreciate it. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Benji Gregory, 46, American actor in the TV show Elf. Shelley Duvall, 80, American actress. Was in the movie The Shining, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Nashville, and Annie Hall. Richard Simmons, American fitness guru. Did the Richard Simmons Show. Was in the shows of Arrested Development, General Hospital, and The Larry Sanders Show. Shannon Doherty, 53, American actress. Was in the TV shows Beverly Hills 90210 and Charmed. And James B. Sicking, 90, American actor. Longtime character actor, hit his sweet spot getting cast in the 1980s police drama Hill Street Blues. He was in Doogie Howser, MD, and the movies The Pelican Brief and Star Trek III, The Search for Spock.
And so we remember these fondly for their contributions to the arts, with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. All right, let's move to best, funniest lines. I'll start with the narrator. When you come to the end of the line with a buddy who is more than a brother and a little less than a wife, getting blind drunk together is really the only way to say farewell.
Jay Sebring. Is everybody okay? Rick Dalton. Well, the motherfucking hippies aren't. That's for goddamn sure.
Your impression of Leo is just... Okay, who's next?
I had pretty much the same one, and then it ends with I got one in my pool with the fucking flamethrower.
I got nothing. I can never remember lines, but it's always funny to hear them.
Oh, Jesse, you should have said something, because you could look them up on IMDb.
No, I just want to... If I can't remember it, then it's something I don't want to say. I got to at least remember the line. But I love rehearing them, because they were pretty funny when I hear them.
Rick Dalton. All right, that's too hot. Anything we can do about that heat? Flamethrower trainer. Rick, it's a flamethrower.
Bruce Lee. You're the one with the big mouth. I would really enjoy closing it, especially in front of my friends. but my hands are registered as lethal weapons. That means we get in a fight and I accidentally kill you, I go to jail. Cliff Booth. Anybody accidentally kills anybody in a fight, they go to jail. It's called manslaughter. I think all that lethal weapon horse shit is just an excuse so you dancers never have to get into a real fight.
You got any others?
No, I was thinking of that one. I didn't look it up, but I do remember that.
Okay.
That was, yeah. That's a good one.
I should bring this out almost every time that my dad does some weird name drop from the 50s that I can't think of, and I certainly don't appreciate. Fuck you. Sorry, I don't know the name of every fascist on TV in the 50s.
Cliff. All right. What's the matter, partner? Rick. It's official, old buddy. I'm a has-been.
Rick Dalton. And this is especially important to us who were on last week's episode. Hey, Dennis Hopper, move this fucking piece of shit.
Yeah.
You got any others, Dad?
No, I'm out.
I got one last one.
Okay.
Sharon Tate. Dirty movies have premieres?
Yeah, they're wild.
All right. Let's move to the Stanley Rubric.
For continuity, sorry to interrupt. For continuity, was that... When did Easy Rider come out?
It would have been about the same time. I mean, last week was the anniversary, so if...
Okay, so it would have been out, because that's...
Well, I'd have to look up when the date of the Manson killing was, because I think it is around this time, and I think Easy Rider...
July of 1969.
So it might be actually pretty topical, like it had come out the week before.
Easy Rider release date. July 14th.
Yep, July 14th.
Sharon Tate murder.
And that was August 9th, 10th of 69.
Yeah,
so
I was wondering, because I'm like, oh man, maybe that's close. But yeah, it would have been topical at the time. Even though he was in Italy, maybe he had not.
Well, I mean, if it was the fourth highest grossing film of the year, it had to be number one at the box office, and he lives in Hollywood. So you have to imagine
he was in Italy this whole time.
QT had his historical accuracy there, his timeline right.
Yeah. Like I said, he was living in Italy that entire time.
Yeah, but he might have seen Dennis Hopper around.
Maybe. Maybe not.
I don't know.
Things that I think about.
All right.
But sorry to interrupt.
Let's go to the Stanley Rubric then. Legacy is up first, and for a refresher on this particular category, because this is the 5-year anniversary, this is going to be a particularly difficult category, because this is supposed to be looking at the legacy after the initial 5 years, which is this week. So we're kind of projecting a little bit on how the legacy will be pretty much from right now going forward. With that, maybe I should lead off as I put myself on the roast to begin with.
The pit or the spit to be roasted?
Sure.
On the Brad Pitt.
So, as much as it pains me to say, I think that the legacy for this actually suffers more in the industry than it does necessarily in the public. Now, I think that's hard to imagine, given that I think this is actually a more well-respected movie by critics. But I don't know if this film, unlike other Tarantino films, is necessarily going to be in film schools. It's going to necessarily be anything major. It's not like a revisited film by critics. They liked it at the time, but I just don't know if it's continually coming up. Whereas I do think that the audience, at least because of the immediacy or the recency of this movie, a lot of people, even the normal people, have seen it and or know about it, know a lot of the people in it. Obviously, DiCaprio and Pitt and Robbie are 3 fairly significant movie stars of the last 20 years. So it's hard to ignore that aspect. And Quentin Tarantino is one of the more recognizable director names that we have. So it's hard to say based on that people don't know what this movie is. But then again, I just don't know if it has the staying power. So maybe I'm off, but I have a 2.5 for the industry, and I have a 4 for the public. I have a 6.5, at least to start.
I don't think it's had a huge impact on the industry. At the best, you could say that it helped launch Austin Butler's career, but I don't even think it did that much, really, other than get him a few more roles. His Elvis film really kind of made him a star. The public, as I've indicated, I don't think a lot of people bother to even think about this film or rewatch it or talk about it. I went with a 3.5 for the industry, and I went with a 3 for the public for a 6.5 overall.
I guess you raise an interesting point that I hadn't, even though it is in the back of my mind, I didn't necessarily put in this category, but there are a lot of younger actors who are just on the cusp of doing other things. Like Mikey Madison is in this, and she was in one of the big films from Cannes. Margaret Qualley's gone to do other things. She was in the Coen brother movie earlier this year that I still haven't seen. So there are bigger name actors that Sydney Sweeney was name dropped. Austin Butler was name dropped. There are a lot of younger actors in this movie that I think this is like their first film role. And a lot of them have to be kids of other stars, like Maya Hawke is Ethan Hawke's kid. And so you have some of that, but how much does them being the hippies and the Manson family in this movie really have on the rest of their career? Like the fact that they're all together, you could say, and maybe give a half point to the industry side of things, but I don't think you could probably give much more than that where we sit right now.
Which is where my half point higher than yours came from.
You were at a 6.5. You and I have identical scores.
But you had I had a higher industry score than you did.
I'll go, since I like to interrupt. That's my MO. I like to do that. But for the legacy side, so for the industry, I feel like this is a big change in the industry, because like up until this time, the team ups, I'm thinking about 5 years ago, the team ups are the Marvel movies, and I feel like, in my opinion, this is the change where you can do a team up that's not a Marvel action movie, where you can do something that's a little bit different and have a team up, because you have all these particular big name actors, other actors that are kind of the cusp, first kind of going into the beginning of their careers, teaming up into a big blockbuster movie, in my opinion. And then for the public side, I see the public liked this movie at the time, but what I see most for this from the public is actually in the meme side on like Instagram or like the Facebook, things like that, where you can see clips of these particular scenes, especially the Leo scene where he's pointing at himself and the FBI. I mean, I think that's going to help its legacy going forward, because that's going to be something that's continuously used over time. So my opinion on both of those is that the 5 for the actual industry and then 5 for the public. So I just give that a perfect 10.
Okay. Bar set.
I'm going with I don't know. What I said was 3 for industry and 5 for public. I'm full of shit, but I'm not giving it a 5 for the public right now. It seems like that a lot of times that people are really into Tarantino, or people that have been like following him, and people who like these movies have been kind of fans of his stuff for a while. I don't think new people are getting into it, but we kind of talked about earlier how he's only got one film left. I think 15 years, 20 years from now, he's going to get a whole new generation of people that are going to see his works as a compilation. And I think he's going to start getting a cult level status where I don't think he actually has one right now, even though it's kind of seen that he has one. I think it's going to be one of those where the kids that haven't even been born yet are going to grab onto these films because they all kind of have the same flavor, and they're absolutely gonna love them. The further we get into the future, when popular entertainment gets further and further up its own ass, I think that the Tarantino movies intentionally don't do that. They're very gritty, from everything from their dialogue to the scenery, and I think that's really going to resonate even more in the future than it does now. So those are my scores: is 5 for the public and 3 for the industry. And I picked that for the industry just because there's nothing really more it can do at this point. For the industry, it happens at the time the movie gets released. They used to make DVDs, but it hits streaming, and then you get a couple of months, and that's it. That's you now know what its impact is 3 months in. You're not gonna get anything else out of it.
So that's a 7.75 average between the four of us. Impact and significance. I do think this was a movie that was bigger in the moment. I think it hasn't necessarily gotten far enough out that it's waned in the public impact, but the industry, I think, was much higher on it in the year that it was made. It was a much bigger push initially for Oscars. I think it faded out over time by the time that we got to Parasite in 1917 and some of the other films that were great from that year, because this was kind of a precursor to a lot of the awards season in that particular release year. So I have a 4 and a 4. I have an 8.
I have a 5 for the industry. It had great reviews. It got tons of nominations. It didn't win a ton, but it was a really difficult year. Power-packed Academy Awards with multiple films that I thought were all super qualified for all the awards. So I can't give it points down for that. As far as the public, when this came out, people went and saw it. It didn't have the huge box offices that some of them did, but people who were Tarantino fans definitely went, and a lot of other people went, and it was a fairly well-discussed film. So for the industry, I'm at a 5, and for the public, I believe it's a solid 4, and I could be convinced to go up to a 4.5.
I mean, to be fair, this is a rather stacked year in where this film, I think, finishes number 24. Knives Out, which obviously did well enough to garner a additional 2 sequels that both, I think, were bought by Netflix for $1 billion total. That only had $312 million grossing that particular year and finished behind this movie at number 29. So
yeah.
It's not like it was a flop in the box office, even though it was number 24. We just had a lot of really, like, this is the peak of maybe the film going tickets sold era in just the amount of films that were coming out in that particular year.
I don't think that the Tarantino films always have the mass appeal that a lot of the other ones do. So people are going to go see other things before they go to a Tarantino movie, and they had to pick. They're not going to go see them all. They're going to go see 1, maybe 2, and they're not going to go to the theater again that year.
So at the time, let's go for the industry for my thought. Yes, it's got a lot of word praise. It won awards. I put that as a 5. For the public, it's the same thing. I just think about my own personal friend group at that time. This is the movie they kept talking about. And this was the thing they kept ringing on me, like, you haven't seen this movie yet? And then finally seeing it, and I'm like, oh my god, I've missed the boat. And I feel like this had a pretty big significance, at least for my particular group. And I think I could almost put in the normal sense at that particular time. I think this has a very big significance. And I guess I'm going to be the outlier again. I'm going to be a 5 and a 5 for another perfect 10.
Ruining the average, aren't you?
Apparently.
Keith, you're the only one left.
Yeah, I thought about this backwards, and I should have saved the comments that I made last time for this time around. And I got nothing. As much as I enjoy hearing myself talk, I just don't have anything right now. Other than, I guess for the industry at the time, I'm going to give it a 4 because of the aforementioned things that we had discussed, where I don't think it could have done much better than it did because of what it was up against, and it was never designed to be the number 1 hit movie in America.
No.
It wasn't for everybody, and he'll never make something for everybody. I think also for the public, I gave it a 4 because I think 80% of the people in some way, shape, or form would really appreciate this movie, and then there are enough that weren't. I wasn't quite sure exactly how to measure that one, But that was the logic in my head, hence the number 4. So those are my 2 scores.
So we had an 8.75 average between the 4 of us. Novelty. Dad, do you want to lead off here?
This was not Tarantino's first rewrite of history, so I had to give it some points down for that. But for addressing a subject, which is an homage really to the 60s and the 60s films, and the transition from the Hollywood era of the cowboy into more modern film. I think it did a really great job and addressed subjects and issues that had never been addressed before, and did it in a very pleasing, I mean, if you can call such a series of events lighthearted, but the characters themselves were not overly serious. I'm going to give it an 8.5 overall, simply because I think it executed beautifully, but the underlying premise was not completely new, but the subject matter was.
I'm not too far away from you on this. I agree that because this is the 3rd, maybe even the 4th, kind of rewriting of history, the Cosmic Justice series that he's got going on, for me, it gets a little bit weighted down in the originality, even though I do think that this is still unique even among his projects, and this style of filmmaking or this type of subject material is almost unique to him. So I can't give it like full points down like it's run of the mill, but I give it a pretty hard 3. And then on the execution side of this, we talked about a casting, we talked about the production design. I think the acting is spectacular in this film. I think the direction is top notch. So it's hard for me to give it anything less than a 5 in my humble opinion. So I have an 8.
I gave it a 9. It's because Dana and Tom know when I'm going to show the wife a movie. So she usually doesn't like things that are good. So when
it's genetic.
When I'm going to show her stuff, like I got to get her psyched up. I say, I want to show you this movie. And her response is going to be, well, what is it about? And the novelty of it is what sort of makes it fun and exciting, and gives it the drive to be able to hand that to somebody that might not be interested in a Tarantino type movie, and get them to say okay. And it can also kind of invoke some interest in that time period for somebody who doesn't know anything about it. Like if people are wondering why is this kung fu guy, why is he running his mouth, and why is he getting his ass kicked? Oh, that's Bruce Lee. Okay, who's Bruce Lee? I'm going to let you discover that on your own. And the fact that the characters were, alcoholics, the scene where he opens the car door and all the cigarette butts come falling out.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm sticking with my my 9. And again, I could be wrong, but that's how I feel.
Just hearing all 3 of yours, I feel the same thing. Like I feel like the direction, the acting was amazing. The uniqueness, Keith, you really hit it on that. The uniqueness. A lot of the scenes or movies from the 60s, they're interpreting the 60s. I feel like they give you a different interpretation. I felt like this is a unique way of looking at the 60s, where you see the kind of the realness of the people. Like they have drinking problems, they open up the door, the cigarettes are falling out, things like that. I felt like it gave it a really, really unique spin on it. Which when I watch movies from the 60s, I don't really see it. Like I see the smoking part where they're always smoking, but you don't see the second part where it's like you open the door and there's cigarette butts everywhere. So that's my opinion. I feel like that's great, and that is great as well. So my score is still another 10. So I think it's like 3 10s in a row. I got a theme going on here, but like this movie is just, the novelty of this movie is amazing to me. I love it.
So that's an 8.88 average between the 4 of us. Classicness. This is probably way too early to really measure whether this is actually classic or not. We do not have the benefit of time. It's not, in my opinion, right now ahead of its time. It's not old enough yet to be classic. And I don't find that there's anything particularly ill-classic about this. So I'm going to go with the fence-sitting median 7.
I'm going to go slightly above that at a 7.5 because I think it accurately portrayed an element of society, the 60s, that had not been portrayed. And I think it did it accurately. There was nothing offensive. The characters, the male-women roles are pretty much time-oriented. I didn't have a problem with that. I don't have any issues. I think the fact that it was well-balanced between the men and women in this film does show a certain level where it's a little more than what was normally expected at the time the film was set. So I want just a kick higher at the 7.5.
So Classicness, I agree with Tom. This particular, we're too early in this particular lifespan of this movie to really give a full one on that. But I think going forward in the future, like I agree with Dana that this will be the movie to look back on in order to get the real sense of the 60s, of at least the late 60s. So, like, I think this will be the movie, barring some scenes, because obviously you can't show some violent scenes in class, but this could be the movie to pull out in a history class about the 60s to kind of give you the best snapshot of what the 60s would look like. So I think going forward, I think I'm on another 10 here. So 4 10s in a row. But like I said, I could be completely wrong in 5 years. If we revisit this in 5 years, maybe I'll have a different opinion on it, but I think this will be the movie to look back on.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. What I'm going with an 8 out of 10 Nazi scalps, because for the reasons I said earlier, is I'm hoping that a lot of what he has done, once the compilation of what he's accomplished is sort of grouped together and you can take it as a package. I'm hoping that catches on, but this being a snapshot, or I think a good snapshot of what the late 1960s, or even just the 60s in Los Angeles was probably like. At the same time that this movie takes place, not long before, they were shooting episodes of Dragnet, and you could see how campy those are, and the stylized version that we're used to seeing of what Los Angeles looked like at the time. Is it Dragnet and the Andy Griffith Show, or is reality closer to this? My dad was 25 at the time, and he's a lot more like Rick Dalton than he is any other 1960s character that I've seen on the television. So, yeah, I'm going with an 8.
Okay, so that is an 8.13 average between the four of us. Finally, we get to rewatchability, and I'm just going to let Jesse get his 10 out of the way right now.
Yeah. This movie is, if it's on the television, I'm watching it all the time. So, like, I could, yeah, it's a 10. I'm just going to go all right. It is a definite 10 for me. I don't put myself out of the way to not watch this movie. I went last week where I had my rating scale. You basically have the 1 out of the 5. Anything 3 and above is movies that I think are good. 5 are movies that I actively go out to watch. 4 are movies, if they come on, I will actively watch them. I won't turn it off. 3 are movies that I think are good, but I probably will never watch again. Anything below that is either bad, unwatchable, and why did I waste my time watching this? This is a definite 5 in my book. I would watch this every single time it came on. I actively look to find it out and watch it. I'll actively buy any sort of DVD or digital source to actually watch this movie. So it's a 5 and a 5, which equals 10.
So, Dad, I'll let you be the Debbie Downer here.
Okay. Am I going to watch it if it's on? Yes. Am I going to purposely put it on? Maybe. Am I going to suggest this to somebody? Somebody who's never seen it. Am I going to say, hey, you should really watch this and put it on? Yes. It's just going to be within that realm of right on the cusp of, yeah, I should probably watch it more often than I do. I'm just not going to be that motivated because quite frankly, the first time I saw it, it was absolutely wonderful, and it was fresh and new. And the joke, being the last scene, was still funny, but it just wasn't as funny when you knew what the end was going to be. And so to me, that kind of dampens the rewatchability of it a bit. So I went with a 7.5.
Well, you're likely to be the low man on this one. Keith, let's let you go here.
I gave it a 9. Like I said, I've seen this movie 6 times. I think every time by myself, because I get reminded that the movie exists, and I try to think of all the scenes in my head, not even necessarily in order, and then when I can't, I say, oh, well, I gotta go put it on. So at least once a year since it came out, I've been firing it up and have thoroughly enjoyed every time. And it's never just background noise to me. But I won't show it to other people, because when there's other people around, I want to socialize and I want to talk and enjoy their company. And when this movie is on, I can't do that because I won't pay attention to them because I can't take my eyes off the movie. It's just one of my favorites. And that's like I said, it's a 9 for me.
If this is on, I am leaving it on and my day is stopping. And to be quite honest, the last rung of the ladder is, if I'm sick, am I putting this on? There are very few films that probably go into this, but the first time I had COVID, I do remember watching this film. And about every 6 months, I'll be like, I haven't seen that movie again. I should probably turn it on. That's one of the rare things of a modern movie for me. I absolutely adore this film. I don't know if it's like one of my all-time favorite classics, so I have it slightly at a 9.5, but it's right up there. So that gives us a 9 average between the four of us. For audience score, we had a 73% for Google users and a 70% for Rotten Tomato users, so apparently none of them love it as much as the rest of us. But that gives us a 7.15. So to repeat the categories, we had a 7.75 for legacy, a 8.75 for impact and significance, an 8.88 for novelty, an 8.13 for classicness, and 9 for rewatchability, and a 7.15 for audience score, giving us a final total of 49.66. And putting it on our current list, thanks mostly in part to Jesse, between E.T. and It's a Wonderful Life at number 59. If you disagree with any of our scoring or any of our guests' scoring on this particular film, or you just don't like this movie, you can certainly send all of your hate comments and mail and direct messages to any of our socials at GMOAT Podcast, that's GMOAT, or you can find us at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com or on our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMOAT Podcast. Again, GMOAT. And Ronnie Duncan Studios is with a Y, not an IE. Let's move to remaining questions. We don't have any lister questions this evening, so we will start off with a few of the ones that I had for this particular film. Does Cliff actually fight Bruce Lee? Now, the reason I mention this is if you carefully watch, when you start out the scene, there's a crowd of people around, obviously, and by the middle point of the scene, they're the only two there, and we never know why there are no people around all of a sudden. So is it fictitious? Is it something made up in Cliff's mind? Is it something where we're missing a gap somewhere in between?
Oh, I mean, that might be a continuity thing, why there are people not there. But you got to remember, this is all when Cliff is thinking about why he's not allowed him to a new set. So maybe it's his own recollection of how things happen. Because I think at the beginning of the part, he's thinking, like, why? I mean, I didn't do anything wrong at the beginning. And then he's thinking about it, like, oh, wait, yeah, I did. I threw this guy into a car. That car was owned by one of the big ups in the actual movie. They have a lot of power in cinema. That's probably why I'm not getting jobs right now. Because you can see it at the end of that scene where he's changing the antenna. He's like, yeah, that makes sense. Why I'm changing an antenna right now and not being the stunt double on Rick Dalton's new show.
I don't buy into all this. I mean, film is literally, unless the director or clearly evidences that this is a dream sequence or imagined, I'm going to give it the reality because that's what was intended by the director. So no, I'm not going to go anywhere. And yes, he actually did fight Bruce Lee, and it just happened that there was nobody around when particular shots were done. They could have been all bunched up into the other direction because they weren't sure which way the fight was going to go, whatever. Doesn't matter. And it's Bruce Lee. It's not like it's Chuck Norris.
Or Steven Seagal.
Or Jean-Claude Van Damme.
I mean,
he's actually cool.
He did give him a Steven Seagal move where he just kind of whooshed him to the side and he fell into the actual car. That was a Steven Seagal move.
Personally, I would take Cliff Booth over Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse, but that's just
scandalous.
I've never seen Roadhouse, so I can say that.
He ripped someone's neck out or
throat, yeah.
I don't buy into the alternate continuity thing or any of that either. It's not the style of the film or the director or any of that. And I doubt that the question has ever been asked, but if it has, it was probably answered, what? No, that's stupid. And then he went on to talk about, feet or something else. And
what?
Yes, can we talk about the feet in this movie?
Okay, go right ahead.
Everyone. Like Quentin Tarantino has this thing with women's feet in that they need to have their own appearance. They're their own character in his movies. It's a thing.
I thought it was funny when you brought up the Sharon Tate thing where she didn't wear shoes. I mean, going into that scene, she's wearing boots. So then I thought, is this just Quentin Tarantino just wanting to see a woman's foot on screen again? Because you see women's feet throughout the whole movie, throughout all of his films. If there's a woman, you're going to see her foot at some point.
Doesn't Margaret Qualley put her feet up on the dash or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess I hadn't really thought of it, but yeah, now thinking back to Pulp Fiction, there is something with the feet there too. So yeah, okay.
In Kill Bill, and you haven't seen any of those yet. That's right.
Wiggle those toes.
It is.
And yeah, there is the whole thing of trying to fit the shoe in. Why can't I think of her character? But in Inglourious Bastards, to that, yeah, I guess there is a thing. Maybe he has a foot fetish,
or he did it a couple of times, and then somebody said, "Oh, that guy's weird." That's a thing, and they noticed it, so now he can't not put it in because he just can't not anymore. He's going to be a dick about it. But yeah, you see at first when in that sequence where she was, I thought that those boots were meant for walking, and I thought that's what they were trying to illustrate. But then there was, the girl in the car with her feet up, and then and all that, and then you saw her hairy pits, and you're like, oh look, she's from Madison, and but
wow,
I'm gonna do some deep sobbing after this one. He is cutting deep in my town.
Maybe that's what actually happened with the film critic. It was actually the foot critic, and somebody figured it out. Oh boy. Okay. Did Cliff kill his wife?
Of course.
I hope so.
It may not have been intentional.
I mean, she was an annoying shrew. I'm hoping that he kind of killed her and got away with it because it's a fictional character anyway.
Yeah,
I mean, it implied he's got the spear gun in his lap. And I'm sure it's kind of like, well, we had a big wave and it came up and it just fired.
Doesn't even really say how he got away with it.
Mm-hmm.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it's very ambiguous.
I think it speaks to his temper because that's always been kind of the thing. Is he gets just one too many drinks, or he just gets that little nudge, and then he can't control himself, and he goes as far as whatever environment that he's in allows him to go. And then kind of reels back after and goes, oh, shit. And I like to think that the boat moment, what that was alluding to, was another one of those instances where he just got that little nudge, but it never shows us what what actually happened, because the mystery surrounding that character is part of the allure of the character. So if they had told us, it would have been a lot less fun.
Yeah, my answer is the mystery part. I'd rather be in the dark. I'd rather not. The Schroeder's cat of that moment, I'd rather not know if it's alive or not.
All right. Did Rick get a part in the next Polanski movie?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. And if Sharon isn't murdered, does Polanski end up a fugitive from justice?
If your wife and child are killed in that way, it's got to mess you up big time. I'm not giving any shade to his behavior overall, but, boy.
Hurt people hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm in the agreement with Anna there too. It's this. It's asking the question: was he committed to that relationship and to begin with? Which it feels like he was, for all intents and pretenses, before that. He was committed to that particular relationship. I don't think he would have done it if she was still alive.
And finally, if in the event that he does get the next Polanski movie, he gets more steady work, does he keep employing Cliff Booth?
Of course.
Yeah. I would agree. Like, if I don't think he would have gotten the next Polanski movie, but if he had done that, yeah, that seems to be his MO. This is his guy. He wants him in anything he can have him in.
About this time is when they started creating these whole entourage contracts, where a actor would do a film, and part of their deal was that they got to cast friends or family or people around them in various roles with speaking lines. De Niro is notorious for this. His chauffeur, his chef, his personal valet or personal assistant, they all get to be in his films. And then he doesn't pay them. He doesn't pay them anything out of his own pocket. They get to be in his films, and they get one line. And because they have a line, they get residuals every time the film is shown. And some of them have been able to have been with him a long time, have made hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in residuals being in a De Niro film. And so, of course he does, because there's a long history. And in this case, these two are like an old pair of boots. You can have lots of new ones in the closet, but when you want to be comfortable, you put on the old pair.
Any remaining questions for any of you?
No. Just we answered the foot question.
Okay. Well, I want to thank our two guests for being on with us. Keith, this is your fourth time. One more for your hat. And Jesse, your third time.
Shh. What is this? He already has a hat? That means I should get the gold jacket.
It's a family thing. Anyway. Yeah, because everybody else in the family already has one for actually having been on 5 times. It's just kind of an anticipated hat.
Yeah.
But no, the gold jacket's not happening. But anyway, Keith, I'm not sure when you'll next be on with us. We don't currently have you on the schedule through the rest of the year. And Jesse, I don't think we have you either. So we can't preview anything new. But we do have our season 6 schedule. I have not yet started really putting guests together quite yet for that. But you'll both be eligible for that list. And I'm sure we'll see you guys down the road. But any remaining thoughts for either of you on this movie?
It's a definite movie to go out and see. Give it a shot at least once. If you hate it, you hate it. But I think if you watch it, you will definitely like this movie.
Tell that to my mother.
I will.
Well. Yeah.
Keith, any thoughts for you?
It's a movie that's exciting to talk about. Not a lot of movies out there, in considering how many movies get made every day, that you could sit down at a table with somebody who's also seen it and remembers it, and you could go on about it, in this case, for 2 hours. This is one of those movies, and I'm glad I got to be reminded that it exists so I could watch it one more time for this show.
Well, thank you again to both of you, and we'll welcome you back whenever you guys cross our path again. Dad, any remaining thoughts for the week?
Been given a lot of thought today, and I'm pretty sure we're going to go with the Gmote tumblers with the emblems on them for 15. And I'll have the prototype or the one that will be getting so that when I raise my bourbon during the recording, you'll see the Gmote logo on it. I think that fits appropriately and well and gives me, since I'm ultimately the one paying for it, something to promote on the show and something to utilize. So I think that's going to be a good one. Looking forward to the remaining couple of episodes. I've always loved anytime we do a Hitchcock film, and looking forward to Rear Window. Still love that film, and looking forward to the rest of the summer and into the fall.
Yes, I agree. I think we have some great film selections coming up in the next few weeks. The film after that is going to be The Sixth Sense. It's 25 years for that. And after that, I think we have our revisit of Do the Right Thing. And after that, I think, is The Life of Brian. So it's a good film repertoire of things coming up over the next month or so. We have some good new guests, but next week we welcome on two very familiar veterans to the show, and that'll be a fun time. So thank you, everyone, for listening this week. We'll see you next week. I wish I could be creative. Oh, sweetie, you are. You have a great talent for creating difficult situations. Next week, for our 221st episode, we welcome back our most frequent guest, Christine Duncan, and our two-time returning guest, V.P. Morris, the renowned horror author and podcaster, to discuss yet again another seminal Alfred Hitchcock film for its 70th anniversary, Rear Window. Directed by Alfred Hitchcock, written by John Michael Hayes, music by Franz Waxman, starring James Stewart, Grace Kelly, Thelma Ritter, and Raymond Burr. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in on our fun. You can also email the show at thenewRonnieDuncanStudios.com or at greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. Find us on YouTube, Instagram, X, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GModePodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our technical provider and distributor is Captivate FM.